Welcome to AP World History Modern. This is topic 6.4, Global Economic Developments. The essential question from our text: how did environmental factors contribute to the global economy between 1750 and 1900? The big picture for topic 6.4. Number 1, economics was among the most influential of the several motives driving imperialism. Number 2, Britain industrialized rapidly during the 1700s and 1800s. Number 3, in order to feed industry's desire for raw materials such as cotton, copper, and rubber, Europe looked to Asia and Africa. Number 4, American agriculture looked to South America for fertilizer. Number 5, the people of these continents were also potential consumers of European and American manufactured goods. Number 6, colonial peoples provided the labor for large-scale projects such as building railroads or telegraph lines. Number 7, colonial workers were paid meager wages for difficult and dangerous labor. Number 8, in short, natural resources, new markets, and low-wage labor drove economic imperialism. Topic number 1, technological developments. What's the big idea here? The Industrial Revolution did not just take place in factories. It affected transportation and communication as well. I got 13 takeaways for you on this topic. The introduction of railroads lowered the cost of transporting raw materials for shipment to Europe. Railroads helped open up colonial markets for manufactured goods. Europeans often pointed to their railroad projects as evidence that imperialism helped the peoples of Asia and Africa. However, providing new transportation technology to the colonies primarily served the interest of the colonizers. In India, the British built a complex railway network that stretched from the interior to the coast in order to ship raw materials out of the country easily. The overwhelming majority of railway workers in Africa were natives who were paid much lower wages than their European counterparts. Railroad technology was a means of extracting as many resources as possible from subject lands while paying colonial laborers as little as possible. In 1870, steamships became practical for long distances due to improvements in the design of steam engines. Steamboats could transport people, mail, goods, and eventually perishable goods such as meat and dairy products. Invented in 1832, the electric telegraph transformed communications. Instantaneous communication was a game changer. Telegraph services were introduced in India in 1850, just 5 years after it started in Britain. In 1866, the first permanent transatlantic cable was laid between the U.S. and England. The telegraph would provide communications between countries all over the world. Draw a line in your notes. Topic number 2, agricultural products. What's the big idea here? When Europeans arrived in Asia and Africa, they found mainly agricultural economies, with most people raising enough food to live on. Subsistence farming with perhaps a little left over to sell. I got 7 takeaways for you on topic number 2, agricultural products. Number 1, subsistence farming is still common throughout sub-Saharan Africa, Southeast Asia, and parts of Latin America. Number 2, under control of imperialist powers, subsistence farmers abandoned their traditional ways and grew cash crops instead. These were crops such as tea, cotton, sugar, oil, palms, rubber, and coffee that were grown for their commercial value rather than for use for those who grew them. As cash crops replaced food crops, food prices rose. The growing European middle classes created a demand for meat. Number 6, cattle ranchers in Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay produced beef for export. Cattle ranches, not ranchers, sorry. Number 7, sheep herders in Australia and New Zealand exported lamb. Draw a line in your notes. We got topic number 3, raw materials. What's the big idea here? The demand for raw material that could be processed into manufactured goods and shipped away, often back to providers of raw materials, turned colonies into export economies. Topic number 3, I got 16 takeaways for you. Number 1, Britain's textile mills got 80% of their cotton from the U.S. Number 2, when the American Civil War erupted, Northern warships blockaded Confederate ports, cutting off the supply of cotton. This is something I went over with you last year that should sound familiar. Number 3, as a result, farmers all over the world, from Australia to the West Indies, replaced food production with cotton to make up for the shortage. Number 4, cotton farmers in India and Egypt were able to benefit from the shortages caused by the Civil War. Number 5, natural rubber is made from the latex sap of trees or vines. Excuse me. In 1839, Charles Goodyear developed a process known as vulcanization that eliminated these problems and helped create the modern rubber industry. Number 7, the machinery in Europe's factories required constant lubrication to keep it working, creating a demand for palm oil. Palm oil originated in West Africa, where it was used as a staple food product for 5,000 years. Number 9, prisoners of tribal war were often enslaved to help with the palm oil crops. Number 10, the tusks of elephants provided the product ivory. Most of the ivory trade was in Africa. Number 11, the Ivory Coast got its name from the fact that the French originally set up trading posts there for the acquisition of ivory and slaves. 12, some of the most valuable products were mineral ores used in manufacturing. They came from around the world. Number 13, Mexico produced silver. 14, Chile produced copper. 15, Bolivia, Nigeria, Malaya, Dutch East Indies produced tin. 16, Australia and South Africa, as well as parts of West Africa and Alaska, produced large deposits of gold. Draw a line in your notes. Subtopic A, diamonds. Big idea. Cecil Rhodes and his brother Herbert formed the De Beers Mining Company in 1880. By 1891, De Beers accounted for 90% of the world's diamonds production. Diamonds are going to be a bloody business. Check out a movie called Blood Diamond. If you get a chance, give you an idea. But Cecil Rhodes, I got some quotes for you here. In his will, he put, the Anglo-Saxon race was the first race in the world. What do we know now? By most evidence, now archaeological and otherwise, it's actually the exact opposite. It looks like the human race originated in Africa. Anyway, more quotes from Cecil Rhodes. The more of the world we inhabit, the better it is for the human race. Here's another quote. He advocated the governance of a subject race. Okay, so he looked at the black population in Africa and he said it's in a state of barbarism. This guy's going to be an architect for white supremacy and apartheid. So my question to you, describe these comments in one word. I bet you could do it. All right, topic number 4, global consequences. What's the big idea here? Industrialization was accompanied by the need to find raw materials that could be turned into finished products to be sold globally, often bought with the profits from raw materials. Topic number 4, global consequences. I got 9 takeaways for you. Number 1, as urban populations grew, the demand for food was increasingly met by imports. These imports were made possible by new technologies such as refrigeration. Number 3, as the industrialized nations grew wealthier, stock exchanges developed, allowing more people to invest their capital, and the need to protect global markets and investments grew rapidly. Number 4, commercial extraction caused long-term consequences. Number 5, farmers were allowed to raise only cash crops such as sugar and cocoa at the expense of the other agricultural products. Number 6, this use of land led to monocultures, or a lack of agricultural diversity, particularly in developing nations. 7, cash crops such as cotton rapidly depleted the soil's natural fertility. Moreover, crop diseases and pests spread more easily when there was only one crop planted in an area. Number 8, today, many former colonies have been unable to reuse their land because the development of monocultures has badly damaged croplands. Number 9, as a result, they often must import basic agricultural goods in order to feed their people. Closing thoughts on topic 6.4. Imperialism, it defined a pecking order throughout the world. The haves and the have-nots are going to be clearly identified. And this is why I want you to think about our lecture when I talked about Ayn Rand's book, Atlas Shrugged, in Fountainhead. We watched some video on Ayn Rand and her take on capitalism and communism. Then we talked about John Lee Anderson's biography on Ernesto Che Guevara. And we saw some video on his take on communism and capitalism. I can't think of two books that are so opposite and two people that had such opposite opinions and ideas on these isms. Your job is to have an informed opinion rather than just an opinion. The reason I talked about Che and Ayn Rand, it's not to, persuade you either way. It's to get you to think. Whether you like or hate an ism, you got to know what it is, right? So much social media right now about socialism, good and bad. Guess one thing most of those people have in common. They can't tell me what socialism is. So if you're going to love or hate an ism, you better know what it is. So hopefully we're getting you an informed opinion rather than just an opinion. In this topic, 6.4, high profits for industrialized countries that practice imperialism came in part from low wages, racist, xenophobic, and nationalistic economic policy. Colonized workers often died from this exploitation of cheap labor. And in a lot of instances, if you're paying attention, it's just right out slavery. Due to cash crops and monocultures, some countries had to pay for imported basic agricultural goods to feed their people. Ironically, they were paying for imported goods they used to grow themselves. What does that mean? One of your biggest bills, I know it's one of my biggest bills every month, is food. Well, if you're growing your own food and you could feed your family, that's a major expense you don't have. When you're being forced to grow these cash crops, you can't eat coffee beans, right? And these families now are buying stuff they used to grow themselves, or they have an expense of food. So they're making less money on the cash crops, so they're not getting a good deal. And now they have to pay for their food or pay for something they used to grow themselves. It's just devastating to the indigenous peoples of whatever area we're talking about, whether it's Latin America or Africa. And imperialism, capitalism, and industrialization, as you see here, it's going to make certain groups wealthy. Others are going to become middle class, while others are going to have their lives and their cultures and their countries destroyed. Some people are slaves. They're literally slaves, and they're going to be worked to death. They're going to be treated inhumanely. So the big questions here is capitalism good or bad? Is imperialism good or bad? Is socialism good or bad? Is communism good or bad? Is there a perfect ism? Guess what all 5 of those questions have in common? They're all bad questions because these are complex ideas. This is a big thing to try to understand. What perspective? If I'm a British textile importer and exporter from Great Britain, I'm probably making mad bank. I'm loving capitalism. I'm loving imperialism. I'm making a ton of money. If I got a decent job in Europe and I'm getting paid a decent wage, I might become lower class to middle class or working class. I might be moving up the ladder, so I might like that. Man, if I'm in a diamond mine in Africa, my life sucks, right? So all these isms, all I'm asking you to do is understand, how do you get an Ayn Rand, right? Because we're laying down the groundwork where we're going to get Ayn Rands of the world, and we're going to get Che Guevara's of the world. And Che Guevara and Ayn Rand, if they would have sat down and had a cup of coffee, it would have been a very quick cup of coffee. They would have hated each other. But why? Why did they have such different opinions? I'm not asking you to agree or disagree with either one of them, but understand why their opinions were so different. I think topic 6.4 can help you on that journey. All right, I'll see you in the next one. Welcome to AP World History.